She was kicked out of her house in the middle of the night. No explanation, no mercy. Her so-called parents dumped her on the street like she was nothing. But what none of them knew was that this nothing girl was worth $50 million. That her real parents were gone. Her true identity was hidden. And the people who raised her were about to lose everything. This is the story of how one broken girl uncovered the truth and came back more powerful than anyone ever expected. Stay with me, because you won't believe how this ends. Asterisk, asterisk. They say the truth always comes out, but for Aria, it came far too late. She was 17 when her entire world came crashing down. Until then, she believed she was just an ordinary girl living with parents who never really loved her, but who, she thought, had at least given her a home. That illusion shattered the night they threw her out, not because she did something wrong, but because she had unknowingly become useless to them. You see, Aria had no idea she was worth $50 million. She didn't know the people she thought were her parents weren't really her parents. And she didn't know that her biological mother and father, people she had no memory of, had left her everything when they died. But others knew, and they took full advantage of her ignorance. It began with a letter. Not one she received herself, but one she accidentally saw lying half open on the kitchen counter when she came home from school one rainy afternoon. The envelope was thick, stamped with a gold seal from a law firm she'd never heard of. She hadn't planned to read it, but the first line, printed in bold, stopped her cold. Regarding the trust and inheritance of Miss Aria Eleanor Harper. Her heart dropped. Harper. That was her last name. But the rest? Trust? Inheritance. She heard footsteps coming and quickly put the letter back. Her mother, Susan, stormed in, snatched the envelope, and gave her that look again, the one Aria knew all too well, filled with resentment and coldness. You're snooping now? Susan snapped. Ungrateful doesn't even begin to describe you. Aria didn't say anything. She never did. She had learned long ago that no matter what she said, it would only make things worse. That night, Susan and Robert, the man she called Dad, didn't speak a word to her during dinner. They barely looked at her. The silence was heavier than usual. She sensed something was coming, but she never expected what happened next. At midnight, they knocked on her door. Not with worry, not with love, but with cruelty. You need to leave, Robert said simply. We're done. We're not your parents. Never were. Aria froze. She thought it was a joke. But it wasn't. Susan tossed a bag at her feet, stuffed with clothes, her sketchbook, and a cracked phone. You think we'd keep you around forever? Susan sneered. We did our part. The arrangement is over. Arrangement? What arrangement? She didn't understand. But before she could ask, the door slammed shut behind her. And just like that, she was alone, on the porch, in the dark, with nowhere to go. She sat under the street lamp for hours. The rain soaked her clothes. Her fingers were numb. She clutched her sketchbook against her chest and stared up at the sky, trying to figure out what she had done to deserve this. But Aria had done nothing wrong. She didn't know that the letter she saw was one of many. That for years her so-called guardians had been receiving updates from lawyers managing her inheritance. that they were never meant to raise her out of love, only to hold on to her until she turned 18. Her real parents, Amelia and Christopher Harper, were tech entrepreneurs. Young, brilliant kind. They died in a plane crash when Aria was just 5. They had no family left, and so, in their will, they left everything to Aria with the condition that a guardian would raise her until adulthood. They couldn't predict that the guardians would see her not as a daughter, but as a payday. The Harpers left behind a fortune. Private estates, luxury properties, stocks, a yacht, a scholarship foundation, and $50 million in liquid cash. All of it under a trust, locked until Aria's 18th birthday. That birthday was just 92 days away, and Susan and Robert knew they wouldn't get a single cent beyond that point. They had gotten greedy. They had tried to access the funds early. They'd claimed Aria was mentally unfit, that she needed the money now for medical treatment, but the trust was airtight. They failed so instead of waiting those last 92 days, they kicked her out. Because to them, she was now a liability, a threat, a reminder of money they couldn't steal. Aria didn't know any of this yet. She only knew she was on her own. For weeks, she drifted. From parks to shelters to bus terminals. She ate barely. Once a day, she kept her head down. But despite it all, she refused to give up. There was something deep inside her, a voice she barely recognized that kept whispering, "Hold on, Dot." And then one morning, as she sat outside a coffee shop sketching, in her notebook, a man approached her. He was tall, well-dressed, and carried a briefcase. "Are you Aria Harper?" he asked. She nodded, unsure. He handed her an envelope and smiled. "I've been trying to find you for weeks." He was from the law firm that had managed her parents' estate since their death. His name was Marcus Delaney. He told her everything. He explained who her real parents were. He showed her documents, original birth certificates, court records, video messages left by her mother. He told her about the trust fund, about the estate, about the empire she never knew she owned. Aria sat in silence. Her hands shook. The name Amelia Harper felt so familiar, though she hadn't heard it in years. She whispered, "They really loved me." Marcus smiled, "More than anything. And they made sure you'd be taken care of. It's time to claim what's yours." On her 18th birthday, Aria walked into the marble halls of the Lockwood and Pierce law firm. She wore a borrowed dress, her hair tied back with a ribbon she'd kept since childhood, the only thing she had from her early years. They greeted her like royalty. They offered her tea, kindness, comfort, things she hadn't felt in so long. In the center of the table was a sealed box. Marcus unlocked it. Inside were letters, photos, jewelry, a small teddy bear from her childhood, and a USB drive. He handed her a set of headphones and pressed play. Her parents' voices filled her ears. "Happy birthday, Aria," her mother said through the video. "We made this in case we couldn't be with you. If you're seeing this, it means life didn't go the way we planned. But it also means you're strong enough to find your way." Her father's voice followed. "You are our everything. We know you'll grow into someone kind, wise, and powerful. Use what we've left you not just for yourself, but for the world. Do good, be better than we ever were, and remember, you are never alone." Tears streamed down Aria's face. For the first time in her life, she felt something shift inside her, a sense of belonging, of identity, of purpose. She spent the next few weeks learning everything about her inheritance. She hired financial advisors. She visited the Harper family estate, a breathtaking glass mansion on a cliffside. She walked through gardens her mother once designed. She saw her father's inventions locked in display cases, and then she made a decision. She didn't want to live in luxury while others suffered like she did. So she launched the Harper Hope Foundation, an organization dedicated to helping abandoned and homeless teens find homes, education, and therapy. She poured millions into it, not for recognition, but because she knew how it felt to be discarded like garbage. She tracked down Susan and Robert too, not out of revenge, but for justice. With her new legal team, she uncovered years of fraud, forged documents, and false statements made by her former guardians. A case was filed, assets were frozen, charges were pressed. They lost everything, not because Aria demanded it, but because the law caught up with them. She never spoke to them again. Instead, she focused on healing, on building. Within 2 years, the Harper Hope Foundation had opened shelters in 10 cities. Thousands of kids had access to education, food, and support, things Aria had once been denied. But she didn't stop there. She invested in startups led by young women. She funded art programs in underfunded schools. She offered scholarships to kids who had been told they'd never amount to anything. Every night, she looked at the photo of her parents on her bedside table and whispered, "Thank you," because despite the darkness she had endured, she had found the light, not in the money, not in the estate, but in herself. The inheritance didn't make her powerful. Knowing she was loved did. And so, when people ask her how she survived, how she managed to rise from nothing, she simply says, "I remembered who I was and who I was meant to become."